Hi guys, hi everyone. Very good evening to all of you. Nice to see just 91 of you out here. I was hoping we will double yesterday's numbers after we had such a wonderful session together. It's good to see you all. Thank you for tuning in and welcome to the second session of the Hearts MUN 2024 conference. If you can hear and see me clearly, as usual, can I get a thumbs up in the chat box? Seems like nobody wants to give me a thumbs up. Thanks. I appreciate it. Someone's got pizzas, burgers, pies. Yep, audible. All right, fantastic. Good to see all of you here. Hello, hello, hello. Big fan of Manchester United myself. Right then, position papers. Yes, Gomti, we have position papers. We've shared it with you in your respective committee groups. So, beginning with today's session, yesterday we completed 17 points. We're going to complete the rest of the ROP today, and I am going to essentially share with you the details of the rules of procedure as I share my screen with all of you. Fantastic. So yesterday we completed the unmoderated caucus. Today we're going to start with something which is called points. So what are points? How does it work? As you must recall, in our previous session, I had told you that there are going to be multiple times the chairperson is going to repeat a very robotic statement. That statement is any points or motions on the floor. We discussed a few motions yesterday as well, setting an agenda, moderated caucus, unmoderated caucus, and a few others as well too, right? Similarly, how you have motions, you have something which is called points as well. There are in some totality four different points that you can use during your course of the conference at large. How do you do this? Like everything else, you raise your placard and you say the point that you want to say. So the four types of points, beginning with the point of personal privilege. This is the only time, that you can interrupt another speaker. Otherwise, while someone is speaking in the conference, you cannot interrupt another speaker as well at large. So when you can use something called point of personal privilege. It is an option when, say, for example, you cannot hear what the other delegate is saying. Suppose they are, sitting at the back of the classroom, or they are speaking very softly. At that point of time, if you're unable to hear them, they're inaudible. You can raise your placard and you can essentially say point of personal privilege. I cannot hear the delegate of so and so country. Similarly, in case you need to be excused from the committee, maybe your mom is calling, maybe you want to go to the washroom, maybe you need to use the restroom, maybe you want to go get some water from outside from the coolers, what you can do is you can raise your placard, you can say point of personal privilege, and essentially you can excuse yourself from the committee. So this is your first type of point that exists in the rules of procedure. Similarly, there's another kind of point which is known as point of information. So what is point of information? Point of information is essentially where you can point out any factual errors that have been raised by another delegate. Let me give you an example. Suppose I am Kim Jong-un. All right. Suppose I'm Kim Jong-un from North Korea. I wish I never will be like him, but point because he has a really bad hairstyle. But what I'm trying to tell you is that suppose I was a delegate of North Korea and I said in my country, North Korea, I don't have any nuclear weapons. It's completely false, right? Because everybody knows that North Korea has nuclear weapons at their disposal. So what happens at this juncture in time? What happens in this juncture in time is I, as another delegate from another country, I can raise my placard and I can say point of information, and I can point out the fact that, hey, you know what? The delegate of North Korea is giving inaccurate and false information in committee. And as a matter of fact, North Korea does indeed have nuclear weapons at their disposal in their country. Remember, when you use the point of information, it is very important for you to back it up with proof, with evidence as well. You cannot just go around accusing another country of false information without actually having consolidated credible information backing your claim that this information shared by another delegate is false. All right. This really helps you get points with your chairperson as well. It shows that you're well researched. It shows that you're paying attention in committee. So if you actually feel another delegate is giving false information in committee, use this point of information as and when required. It will benefit you in committee at large. So keep this in mind, but also remember that you must have credible sources of information to back it up as well. What are credible source of information? Any reputable news agency, both nationally and internationally. In examples include the Times of India, BBC, CNN, the Reuters, Amnesty International. Any well-known, reputed source of information can be considered a credible source of information. Don't go showing us an Instagram reel or an Instagram post saying that, hey, you know what, this is the post that I saw and that's why I feel this information is false. It will not be considered accurate. Charan Jackson asked me, is Wikipedia a source of credible information? To be very honest with you, Charan, Wikipedia is not a credible source of information. However, the citations of Wikipedia, when you read at the bottom of the page, those can be credible source of information. So if you read something on Wikipedia, please cross-check with the citations as well. Point of information, to repeat it to all of you, any factual inaccuracy, factual error, false information shared by another delegate can be highlighted to the committee by you by raising your placard saying the point of information and highlighting what that issue essentially is. Next up, you have something which is called the point of order. Point of order, unlike point of information, or rather similarly to point of information, points out any procedural irregularities. We are together since yesterday and now today, we're going through the entire rules of procedure on what we're going to use to discuss and deliberate. Suppose there is another delegate in your committee who may make a mistake or use a wrong procedure during the discussions, debates and deliberations. You can once again point it out, saying that point of order, the delegate of XYZ country has used the wrong rules of procedure for what they intend to do in the committee. So you get plus points for that. So what is the difference between point of information and point of order? Point of information is factual errors, false information, factual inaccuracies. Point of order is an error in the usage of error in usage of the rules of procedure. Similarly, you have point number 4, which is called the point of parliamentary inquiry. This is the one that I want many of the first timers on this training session today. I want you to make maximum use of this point for the simple reason is that instead of somebody else telling you point of order that you're using the wrong procedure, what you can do is you can use point number 4 when you are confused by saying point of parliamentary inquiry. This enables you to ask the chairperson about what procedure you should use. Say, for example, I'm a first-time delegate in the committee and I want to initiate a discussion. I need to initiate a discussion through the different tools of procedure that we are currently analyzing together right now. However, if I am confused about which tool I am supposed to use in this conference to discuss what I have in mind, I can raise my placard, I can say point of parliamentary inquiry, I can approach the chairperson and tell the chairperson precisely what I want to do, and the chairperson will guide me and guide you on what tool of procedure is required to be used during your discussions and deliberation that you'd like to initiate. So these are the 4 types of points. From these 4 points, point of personal privilege is the only one that you don't need to wait for recognition. You can say it at any point of time. You can even interrupt another delegate while they're speaking during point of personal privilege. However, for the other 3 points, you need to raise your placard and wait to be recognized by the chairperson before you introduce that point. So these are the different types of points that are essentially there in the MUN rules of procedure. Moving forward to some more interesting tools of discussion and debate, we have something which is called challenge, as you may be seeing on your screens. This is one of the most fun tools of procedure, in my opinion. It is essentially a one-on-one debate, like a no holds barred one-on-one debate between any 2 delegates. Say, for example, we are sitting in the United Nations Security Council. We have the delegate of Israel and we have the delegate of Palestine. All right. Both of them are any which ways at headlocks with each other. The delegate of Israel can actually raise a placard and say, motion to challenge the delegate of Israel over whatever topic they would like to challenge them for, and essentially introduce that motion into the committee at large. So this is what your motion of challenge essentially is. Just like any other motion, this motion needs to be voted upon as well. Even though the challenge is between two delegates of two countries, it is at the discretion and the voting of the entire committee at large. So if I am Israel and say, for example, Ranjan Kumar is, say, Palestine, I, as a delegate of Israel, raise my placard and say motion to challenge the delegate of Palestine for, discussing war reparations because of this entire crisis. Even though the delegate of Palestine may not want to enter into a one-on-one debate with me, if the rest of the committee votes for it, it is compulsory for the delegate of Palestine to engage in that challenge with me. So even though there may be one person who wants to challenge and the other person who does not want to take the challenge, maybe both of them are also on the same page. End of the day, everything is put through point number 5, informal vote, based on the entire based on the informal voting of the committee at large. This is what essentially is your motion to challenge. It is basically a tool which has two people or two delegates confront each other through an open debate, open discussion, where they debate with each other one to one for a maximum period of 3 minutes on a predefined topic on what the challenge essentially is. This is essentially what your motion to challenge is. Much like all the other motions, you can open this motion at any point of time as well, because the chairperson will repeat the robotic statement, any points or motions on the floor. That time you can raise a placard and open a motion to challenge another delegate of another country. Next up, we have something called a question answer session. Question answer session is a very interesting thing. It also puts a delegate on the spot, which basically means what happens out here is that the committee at large, or even any one delegate, can open this motion where they challenge another delegate of another country for a total time period of maximum 10 minutes and total number of questions, maximum 10 questions. Let me give you an example. Again, coming to the North Korea example. Suppose I am the delegate of North Korea and I am, having my military upgradations take place. I am testing my nuclear powers out here. And all the other countries are not very pleased with me doing something like this. Say, for example, I'm the delegate of China and I am going back and sending my ships and my entire navy to the Southeast China Sea, to the South China Sea, if you know what I'm talking about. At that junction time, if other countries have a problem with it, a delegate can simply raise a placard and say motion to move into a question answer session with the delegate of China, with the delegate of North Korea, with the delegate of whichever country they'd like to ask questions to, for 5 minutes, and total number of questions, 5 questions. It's like, how we had moderated caucus discussion of a subtopic. Question answer session is getting one delegate of one particular country in front of the entire committee and the rest of the committee questioning that delegate based on what their stance is in the committee and what they've been doing in the recent times. It's a great way to put somebody on the spot. But at the same point of time, if the delegate who's being asked questions is really smart and gives you good answers to the question answer sessions, a lot of plus points will be going to that delegate as well. So just like any other motion, like challenge, like question answer, like mod, like unmod, at that point of time, everything goes through the entire voting system of informal vote. So suppose I'm the delegate of North Korea or China or whichever country, and maybe another delegate from another country has opened a motion to ask me questions. I will of course vote against it because I don't want to answer those questions. But if the committee votes for it, then I will be liable to come in front of the entire committee and answer the questions from the committee at large. Like moderated caucus, the delegate who introduces the motion to open a question answer session, that delegate will be given an option whether they want to ask the first question or they want to ask the last question. Again, a smart person will always ask the last question and not the first question, because there are plenty of questions that the committee wants to ask. You might personally have many questions you want to ask as well. You let the other delegates ask those questions, so that in case they have missed out on something, you can reinforce it when your turn comes. This is essentially what a question answer session is. How do we initiate it? Chairperson will say, any points or motions on the floor? I raise my placard. I say motion to move into a question answer session with a delegate of XYZ country. Total time period of maximum 10 minutes and total number of questions, maximum 10 questions. This is another type of motion like your moderated caucus, unmoderated caucus, challenge, and so on. Sorry about that. Moving on to the next point. 1 for 1 against and 2 for 2 against. This is similar to a challenge. Okay, this is similar to a challenge, but this is a more, how do you say, calmer version of having a debate with somebody. And in challenge, what happens is no holds barred, right? You don't need to wait for anyone. It's like a heated debate, like Arnab Goswami, you must have seen on Republic TV. So that is what challenge is. How is it different from 1 for 1 against and 2 for 2 against? I will explain to you. In 1 for 1 against, which can also be coupled for 2 for 2 against, each delegate gets a stipulated time to speak of maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute. When that delegate stipulated time is there, no other delegate in that 1 for 1 against or 2 for 2 against can interrupt or debate with the delegate. They have to listen to what that other delegate has to say. Once their time elapses, then the next person will speak, followed by the third, followed by the fourth, if it is a 2 for 2 against. How is it different from challenge? Challenge is an open-ended debate. There is no reason for me to wait for the other person to finish the sentence. I will just raise my tone higher and I will discuss and debate on a higher pitch and a higher tone with that person at that juncture in time. But in a 1 for 1 against and a 2 for 2 against, which is a more civilized form of debate, but of course not as much fun, is when essentially you wait for each speaker to finish the stipulated time of conveying their points across, followed by which you hear the next person and so on. This again is another type of motion. So how do you do it? Any points or motions on the floor? I raise my placard. I say motion for 1 against with delegate of X and delegate of Y, and for a maximum period of 3 minutes. So if it's a 1 for 1 against, both of us will get like 30 seconds to exchange our thoughts with each other, and we both will wait for us to finish what each other have to say. Just like every other motion, it goes to something called the informal vote. Just like any other motion, it goes to something called an informal vote. Sorry, teacher is just calling me. I just passed on the phone to my colleague. So as I was saying that just like any other motion, it is not, even though one person might want to discuss and get into that discussion, the second person does not want to get into the discussion. If the committee votes for it through informal voting, that 1 for 1 against or 2 for 2 against will always pass. So this is similar to a challenge, but it is a more civilized version of a challenge. Challenge is great fun, but not very content and research rich. 1 for 1 against, 2 for 2 against, the focus is a lot more on content, research, and analysis as well. So another amazing tool for debate, great fun to use in committee, must use it, will always get points in the committee as well. Coming to point number 21, joint statement. This is another very interesting thing as well. Joint statement essentially shows a healthy relationship between two countries, all right, and even more than two countries, for example. What happens in a joint statement is, say, for example, Israel-Palestine crisis again. What is Israel-Palestine crisis? Israel-Palestine crisis is between two countries. India is great friends with Israel, always has been great friends with Israel from the start, much like the USA, who has always been supporting Israel as well. So India and USA can issue a joint statement together, showcasing the strong alliance and strong relationship with each other with Israel in committee, to showcase the strength of that bloc of all those countries who support Israel. Similarly, Palestine can also do the same thing as well. What does Palestine do? Say, for example, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, countries that are very friendly and share the same ideologies as Palestine, they can also come together and issue a joint statement in the committee as well. This is a showcase of strength. This is a showcase of power. This is a showcase of countries showing their strong associations with each other in committee publicly, so that more people join their legions, more people join their, you could say, block. This is what essentially a joint statement essentially means. Like that, you have point number 22, which is called presidential statement. This is another very interesting point, but you have to be very careful while you're using it as well, because a presidential statement can get you a lot of negative marking as well. Just like point of personal privilege, which can interrupt the speaker, presidential statement can also interrupt the speaker as well. The reason because is that when you use this option of presidential statement, you are not only just a delegate of that country anymore, but you're assuming yourself to be the head of state or the prime minister or president, ideally the head of that country, in committee at that point of time. And suppose you are the president or prime minister of a country, at that junction time, you are on a higher hierarchy than the other delegates in the committee. So naturally, being a president or prime minister, I will get first preference to speak even over the other delegates. And at any point of time, I can raise my placard, I can say presidential statement, and I can speak to the committee on any topic of my choice, because I am the prime minister, president, or any other head of state of that country. But remember two things about this. As much as it might be very helpful to you, I'll tell you when people use this and make the mistake of using it. Sometimes when you're hearing multiple discussions, we really want to contribute to that discussion as well. We really have something to say at that point of time. There is a thought in our mind that we just want to throw out into the committee. At that point of time, we cannot do it, right? Because there's already a moderated caucus, there's already a GSL, there's already a flow of committee. So I can't share it at any random point of time. But if I raise my placard, say presidential statement, I can go up and I can speak at any time of my convenience when it comes to the presidential statement. But remember two things about this, like I was saying. One is there is a mandatory yield to questions. There is a mandatory yield to questions, which basically means if you are the president and you're interrupting committee, then based on what you said, the committee can ask you questions as well on what you said. All right, maximum of 3 questions. And the second point is that you cannot use this more than twice in the committee. If you use it more than twice, you will get negative marking. And the third thing that I want to tell you is that if you are going to be speaking as the head of a state of a particular country, and the information that you shared does not befit the role of a head of state, the role of a president, or the role of a prime minister, then you will get negative marking for that as well. It's like, for example, outside my house, there my road is damaged. Okay, in Lok Sabha, for example, outside my house, my road is damaged. There is a, seepin. I'm not going to call up Prime Minister Narendra Modi and tell him to solve it. Prime Minister Narendra Modi is not going to come and speak for the issue outside the road, outside my house, right? It is the job of the local MP, local MLA, the local person who's responsible for that area. It's not the Prime Minister or President's job. So, if you are going to be using presidential statement and you are going to be sharing something in committee, please make sure that it is befitting the profile, the role of a head of state. Else, you will get negative marking for this. So this is a very good point, but at the same point of time, it can always backfire on you as well. So be very careful with the way you approach point number 22, presidential statement. Next up, we have something which is called paperwork. Here's where the things come interesting. What we've discussed about with each other through our session since yesterday and today's half session is mainly about discussions, debates, and deliberations, correct? We've not yet discussed solutions. So after we have multiple discussions, after we have multiple deliberations, after we have multiple debates that essentially take place, we have to, at the end of the day, come down to making solutions for the different things that we have discussed about as well. The first type of solution that you make is something which is called a working paper. It's really easy. There are no complications to this. I'm going to try to find a working paper with me as well to show you what it looks like. If you could give me a second. Give me a mobile. I'm just going to share my screen with you to a working paper and show you what it means as well, so you get a better understanding of what it is. Yep, I have located it. I'm sending it to myself and I'm sharing my screen. So before I share my screen, let me explain to you what a working paper is. All right. Do you remember moderated caucus? Yes. Moderated caucus is basically a detailed discussion on a sorry, I've just got a slightly sore throat. So as I was saying, a moderated caucus is a detailed discussion on a subtopic of the main agenda, correct? Your agenda is like your geography textbook. Your whole textbook comprises of multiple modules, multiple subtopics, multiple chapters. Each chapter is discussed through something called a moderated caucus in that motion. Remember, I also told you that after maybe one or two moderated caucus, the general flow of committees to move into unmoderated caucus, where you lobby, where you negotiate, where you discuss, where you have engagements with other people in committee. It is also used to make something called a working paper. So once you discuss a detailed subtopic, once you discuss chapter 1 of your geography textbook, at the end of the textbook, you have the different question answers that are written out there. The answers to those question answers, the solutions to chapter 1, the solutions to a moderated caucus detailed discussion is something which is known as a working paper. This is what essentially it means. So what is a working paper? You have a detailed discussion on a moderated caucus subtopic. After that entire discussion, you break into something called an unmoderated caucus. In that unmoderated caucus, you essentially draft something which is called a working paper, which is a simplified solution on that specific subtopic. Working paper is not a solution to the entire agenda. It is a solution only to that subtopic which has been discussed in detail in the moderated caucus. It is a solution to only chapter 1. It is a solution to only chapter 2. It is a solution to only chapter 3. That is what working paper is. I've got a copy of a working paper of one of the previous conferences. I'm just going to show it to you right now. So you can get an idea. There's no format for it. All right. There's no format for it. You don't need to essentially write it down in a particular format, just in simple point form. As you can see on your screens, I hope you're able to see my screen right now. This is essentially what a working paper means. So the committee, the name of the working paper is working paper 2.0. It can be 3.0, 5.0, 6.0. You can name it what you like. Then committee, you write the name of your committee. The authors, these are the people who have written and contribute towards writing it. Signatories are the people who support the discussion of the working papers, not necessarily vote for it, but support the discussion, write the agenda of the committee, and write the sub-agenda, which is the moderated caucus topic you have initiated in the discussion. So in this, we are talking about issues faced by IDPs due to national disasters. So acknowledgement point number 1 is acknowledging the severe conditions in sudden onset disaster environments, which are time and again hinder recovery, recalling the concern over island nations and many low-paying nations that are threatened by substantial recession of coastlines or being submerged outright, which would mean these nations would cease to exist, recognizing the concerns related to depleted funds in some regions due to economic stagnation of recession, which may still be going on or may have been caused due to disasters or conflict. So you don't need to pay attention to the content that is written in the working paper. I'm just trying to show you what a working paper looks like and how you're supposed to make it. Very simply, to simplify it for you, just write the name of the working paper, you write the name of a committee, you write the name of the agenda, you write the name of the sub-agenda. That should be absolutely sufficient for you to discuss that working paper. Then you write point number 1, point number 2, point number 3, based on the discussions. When you have moderated caucus is discussing a subtopic of the main agenda. The agenda is like a major problem in this world, right? that major problem has multiple causes. So each cause or each reason why this issue is there in the world is discussed in the moderated caucus, and each solution to each contributing cause to the problem, the solution of that is made in a working paper. So you discuss it with everybody. Everybody will share their concerns in the moderated caucus. No, this is my issue as my country. That is your issue as your country, and so on and so forth. After we discuss all the problems that we all are sharing because of that topic, because of that contributing cause to that world problem, we have to first solve that cause, which is that subtopic. How do you solve it? Through this concept or through this method of a working paper. This is what a working paper essentially is. There's no format for it, just a name of the committee, just a name of the agenda. That should be more than sufficient for you to understand what a working paper is, and essentially you will do this during the period of something called an unmoderated caucus. So unmoderated caucus is what? Moderated caucus, detailed discussion with everybody. Okay, this is one of the contributing causes to this world problem. Let's discuss it in detail. After discussing it in detail and sharing all our concerns and all our problems together, what we do is we break into an unmoderated caucus and come down to logic, reasoning, practicality, understanding, and consensus with each other. During that time, we make a working paper. So suppose I have this problem in my country and you have that problem in your country. What we need to do is we need to come together and we need to solve that problem together, where I need you to understand my problem and you need to understand my problem, and together we create the solution called a working paper, which is a solution to that contributing cause of the major agenda that we're discussing at large. And just like anything else in the committee, if we have made the solution in the committee, it is screen's black still. Just a second. Can you see me now? Am I visible now? No, my camera is here, bro. It's all right now. Okay, great. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Can you see me? Thumbs up if you can see me and the screen that I'm sharing. Fantastic. So as I was saying, a working paper, I am drafting it. Maybe my other countries also drafting it with me. We are discussing our problems. We are creating that solution. Me and my block. Say, for example, Israel, Palestine. Israel and their friends will make one working paper. Palestine and their friends will make their own working paper. Both of these working papers will be submitted to the chairperson, saying, hey, you know what? These are the problems we've identified in the moderated caucus, and these are our proposed solutions. Just because we have given the solution in the committee, that does not necessarily mean that those solutions will be implemented, because just like everything else, we need to take it into voting. We need to take it into confidence of the rest of the committee. So it will go through point number 5, which is informal voting, where if 50% or more, minimum 50% or more delegates of that committee vote for that working paper, saying, hey, you know what, we discussed this problem, we found a solution, we're all in consensus, majority of us are in consensus in the solution, then this working paper will get passed. And then we will move on to our next problem, where again we will get into a moderated caucus, discuss it in detail with each other, again sit together in unmoderated caucus, again find a solution with everybody in the committee for the second sub agenda or the second contributing cause to the larger world problem being discussed in our committee. Remember, if you want to be a successful diplomat, if you want to be a successful MUNer, you cannot only think of your solutions, because if you sit and make a working paper which is going to benefit just your country, there's going to be nobody that's going to vote for it, and it's just going to fail and it's going to be a waste of your time. But what you need to do is you need to diversify your perspectives. Okay, you need to work with other delegates of different countries, understand their point of view, understand what their problems are, and come to a consensus with them to solving the problem together. That is essentially what you need to do in an unmoderated caucus and during your drafting of your working paper. Now I'll tell you the most interesting thing. Just because you have drafted a working paper and you've presented it into the committee, you don't need to necessarily put it to vote directly, because everybody has different opinions, everybody has different points of views. You can actually discuss the working paper through different motions as well. I'll give you an example. You can actually open a moderated caucus to discuss the working paper in detail. I can raise my placard and say motion to open a moderated caucus to discuss working paper 2.0 for a period of 5 minutes, time per speaker 5 minutes. Quite literally, I can essentially discuss the working paper through the format of a moderated caucus. I can even raise a challenge on the working paper. Say, for example, I'm Israel and Palestine is also there and they've also drafted a working paper. Palestine can actually challenge me on the working paper that I've drafted and have like a debate on it. I can even issue a joint statement. I can even do a 1-for-1 against, a 2-for-2 against. I can even open a question answer session with the people who have drafted this working paper. So remember, just because you have had a discussion on that problem and you have come up with a solution, there is no hurry for you to directly table it on the chairperson and say, hey, you know what, let's put this to vote. You can quite literally discuss, debate, and deliberate your own solutions before you actually go into voting upon it. Working papers are very important documents for the simple reason is, if you pass a working paper, in committee in your discussions, it is compulsory to integrate it and make it a part of your final resolution. Which brings me to my next point. What is a resolution? A resolution is like your final exam. It is the complete solution. It is the complete solution of your agenda. It is all your chapters solved together. How do you come up with this? The beauty of it is it's already there with you. Because what is the flow of committee? You enter into moderated caucus, you discuss a particular subtopic, go into discussions and debates on that. Then you go and make a working paper, which is a solution to that subtopic. So how does the flow work? Chapter 1, I discuss, I solved, I've got working paper 1. Then I went to chapter 2, I discussed, I solved, I went to chapter 3. I discussed, I solved, I went to chapter 4. Like that, you will go in this flow of continuously discussing each subtopic in detail that is brought about by you. And finally, once you compile all of these working papers together, you are having your final resolution. Because think about it. Again, visualize your geography textbook. How many chapters are there? 4 chapters, maximum 5. You study chapter 1, you solve chapter 1 solutions, you finish one part of it, then you go to chapter 2, then you go to chapter 3, then you go to chapter 4. After chapter 4, you finished, right, with the whole textbook. Then you go in for the final exam. And what is your final exam? It is your resolution. It is all your chapters together. So all your working papers, which you have discussed through 1.5 days of committee sessions, you will compile it together and you will make a document which is called a resolution, which is your final solution to this world problem or agenda that you are discussing. The difference between a working paper and resolution is, a resolution has a predefined format. It has a format to basically do. You don't need to come up with newer solutions because you've already discussed the entire agenda through its sub agendas. What you need to do in a resolution is you need to just compile all those working papers to formalize your entire resolution. This is what essentially your resolution means. This is where the point that I skipped, called the formal voting, is required in the conference. This is the only time that you will have something that you can see on your screens called formal voting. So let me explain to you what is formal voting. Okay, before I explain to you the format of the resolution, let me explain to you now formal voting, what it essentially means. Then I'll explain to you authors, signatories, and amendments. All right. So coming to formal voting, the point that we have missed out earlier. Formal voting is only required during your resolution. Formal voting requires 2/3 majority, not just simple majority of 50%. All right. So what happens out here is that if there are 30 people in my committee, minimum 21 people need to agree to the resolution and vote for that resolution to pass in the committee. Otherwise, it's of no use. There are totally 3 rounds of formal voting that essentially take place. In the first round, you have 6 different options. You have option 1, which is agree, option 2, which is agree with rights, option 3, which is disagree, option 4, which is disagree with rights, option 5, which is pass, and option 6, which is abstain, which our country, India, is great at doing. So what do these options mean? Agree means yes, I'm voting for it, so it's a tick. Agree with rights means yes, I am voting for it, but I want to explain why I am voting for this resolution. Disagree means no, I am against this solution, I'm against this resolution, I'm not voting for it, so it's a cross. Disagree with right saying is again a no, I'm not voting for this resolution, but I want to explain why I am not voting for this resolution. Option 5 is pass, which basically means, hey, you know what, this resolution is still confusing me as a country, and I need to still take a decision on this, and I'm not ready to take a decision as yet, so I'm going to pass in round 1. And the sixth option is abstain, which basically means that I don't want to involve myself only in this discussion, and essentially I will not vote for it only, neither yes, neither no. This is your first round of voting for your resolution. Round 2. Round 2 is where the people who said agree with rights and disagree with rights. What is agree with rights and disagree with rights? Agree with rights means yes, I'm voting for a resolution, but I want to explain why I am voting for this resolution. Disagree with rights means what? Disagree means I'm voting no, but I want to explain why I'm voting no. So at this stage, in round 2, the people who have said agree with rights will get a minute to explain why they are voting for the resolution. The people who said disagree with rights will get a chance to explain why they're voting against the resolution. Why is this very beneficial, you may ask? It's because of the people who have passed. The people who have passed have not been able to make a decision as yet. This is your final chance and final opportunity to convince them and get them on your side to vote for you. Agree with rights, disagree with rights is always better to use than just agree and disagree in case at all there are certain delegates who pass. Round 3, the delegates who have passed, they have to cast their final vote. And they are left with just 3 options now. Either they say, yes, I'm voting for it. No, disagree, I'm voting against it. And abstain means, you know what, I don't want to vote on this resolution even after all. This is how your resolution voting happens. It happens once in the committee in your final committee session. So formal voting is applicable only to your resolution, unlike informal voting, which requires simple majority of 50%. In formal voting requires 2/3 majority, which basically means out of 30 students, 21 delegates need to agree or disagree with the resolution, agree with the resolution for the resolution to pass, else it fails. This is how it works when it comes to a resolution. Coming back to our point number 24, sorry. The resolution has a particular format. What I'm going to do is, just like I showed you a example of a working paper, I'm going to show you an example of a resolution as well, so you can get a better insight into what a resolution even looks like. Draft resolution. Just a moment. Sorry, I should have had this document handy earlier. Okay, unfortunately, I don't have it with me right now, but I'm going to explain to you what it looks like. All right. It essentially comprises of 2 parts. All right. It essentially comprises of 2 parts. One is called a preambulatory clause, and one is called an actionable clause. I'm going to share on your committee groups an example of a draft resolution once I search it on my PC. But what is preambulatory clause? What is actionable clause? I will tell you. So first, like a working paper, you have resolution 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, 5.0, whatever you want to name it. Then you have the name of your committee. Then you have the name of the agenda. Followed by which you have point number A, which is your authors and signatories. An author is a person who drafts, organizes, and comes up with ideas for the resolution. He or she must abide by the resolution. If you are an author of a resolution, you have to vote for the resolution. Otherwise, why did you make it? Right? So, an author is a person who drafts, organizes, and gives a lot of ideas to the resolution and works towards creating it. Signatories are the people who merely want to discuss the resolution. They are free to cast a vote. However, they are like, okay, fine, you've created this resolution, fantastic. But I will decide whether my country wants to vote for it or not. That is a secondary thing. So I'm supporting the discussion of the resolution, but my vote is my choice on what I am going to do in this thing. For a resolution to be introduced in the committee, there should be minimum 3 signatories apart from the authors who support this discussion. Otherwise, it will not be taken by the chairperson. All right. So coming back to the format of what it looks like, you have your name of your committee, you have your name of your agenda, you have your authors, and you have your signatories. Then you have 2 points. First, you will have subpoint 1, which is your preambulatory clauses. What is a preambulatory clause? A preambulatory clause is essentially the identified problems. The identified problems of this agenda is called your preambulatory clause. Say, for example, Israel-Palestine crisis again. Or say, for example, let's take another example, development of rural communities. What are the problems we've identified through our moderated caucus discussions? Are your preambulatory clauses. All your sub-agendas which you have discussed in your moderated caucus will come under your preambulatory clause. For example, rural communities of the universe don't have, say for example, electricity. They do not have certain primary needs of human beings. This is point number 1 of your preambulatory clause. It's a problem we've identified that, hey, you know what? Rural communities, they have lack of shelter, lack of food, lack of water, lack of clothing. Primary necessities of rural communities do not exist. That is my first point in my preambulatory clause. Second point in my preambulatory clause can be lack of literacy or lack of modern literacy, can also be a term. Point number 3 in my preambulatory clause can be what else can we say? Lack of, say, medical facilities. There are no hospitals, there are no, there are no clinics around the entire place in case of any medical emergency. So infrastructural development is lacking in rural communities for their progress and their growth. Like this, you'll write point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5, point 6, point 7, as many as you want, as many as you've discussed. These are your preambulatory clauses, which are the problem you've identified in your agenda, development of rural communities. You have written all of those things down. After you write down all the problems, you go to actionable clauses. Actionable clauses means what? I have discussed, I have debated, I have deliberated with everybody about everybody's problems in the committee. We have identified the problems in the preambulatory clauses. What we are going to do about these problems, our solutions to these preambulatory clauses or identified problems will come under your actionable clauses, hence the term actionable. Saying, hey, you know what? Point number 1 in preambulatory clauses, primary necessities are missing in major communities of rural areas. What is the solution to that? Countries should allocate a certain budget to development of primary necessity requirements in these rural areas. Point number 2 in preambulatory clause is what? Lack of infrastructure in the rural areas of the world. There should be a mandate given to the infrastructure development authority of that country to develop the infrastructure out there. So essentially what I'm trying to tell you, a resolution is a compilation of your working papers. The problems you've identified and discussed comes in preambulatory clauses, and the solutions from your working paper. The solutions from the working paper will then be taken and put into the actionable clauses, saying this is what we think how we can solve this entire issue. Now, once we've got this entire resolution drafted, before we go into formal voting that we've already explained to you, there is something called amendments. The reason why this amendment basically means I can change any one point of the resolution. I'll tell you why it is an important point. Because suppose there's a working paper some delegate is introduced in the committee, and that working paper has 6 points. From those 5 points are very much applicable to you and you're in complete consensus on those 5 points, but there is one point that you're like, no way, I'm not going to be accepting that. Just because of that one point in that working paper, it's not necessary for you to vote against that working paper, because this point number 25 gives you the ability to change any one point of your resolution, which is essentially your working papers combined. So because those 5 points are applicable to you, that does not mean you have to vote against the working paper. When it comes down to the resolution, you can use point number 25 called amendments, which are essentially changes to the resolutions that you would like to make. And there are two types of changes that you can make. One is a consensual amendment. All right. This is agreeable by all, where everybody's on the same page, like, yeah, bro, it's all good. We can make this change. Voting is not required because everyone's in consensus. These are generally maybe grammatical errors, spelling errors, formatting errors, sentence creation errors. That is what essentially a consensual amendment is, where we don't really change the meaning or definition of what that solution or problem is, okay, but rather more we make certain corrections to its wordings, which does not change the meaning of it. That is essentially what is called a consensual amendment. Then there is a non-consensual amendment, which is disputed in committee. Like, for example, that delegate who voted for that working paper, who was comfortable with those 5 points but not comfortable with one, this is where the delegate can raise a placard and say, motion to open a non-consensual amendment on so and so point of the resolution. So then you can discuss that one point and you can vote on that point, which basically means it will go into voting. And if this voting is an informal voting process where simple majority, should this amendment be there? Should this point be there? Should this point not be there? If this point is there, how should we change it? If this point is not there, should we delete it? Whatever the goal is of that one point that is disputed is gone through an informal, simple show of placards, simple majority, 50% plus. And if people vote for the delegate to introduce that non-consensual amendment, more than 50% of them, then that point in that resolution will change. And technically it will become in favor of that delegate, because now he or she has got all the points of that working paper now in the resolution as per his country's objective. There can be discussions on the amendment. You can have moderated caucus discussion. You can have challenge on it. You can have a detailed discussion on a particular point or particular amendment as well also. So this is what your amendments essentially are. There are two types of amendment large. So concluding what I have to tell you all today, this is what your rules of procedure essentially is. The end objective is discuss, deliberate, debate, share your point of views, but also listen to other people's point of views, push your agenda as much as you want and push your objective as much as you want, but at the same point of time, understand where the other country and other country stance is coming from as well. At the end of the day, in United Nations, in model United Nations, and just generally in life, it's very important to understand that we have to be an inclusive mindset, where even though we might be from India, even though we might be from Israel, even though we might be from Palestine, even though we might be from Japan, does not matter. End of the day, world is a global village. Today you're sitting here, tomorrow you'll be somewhere else. If you don't understand that at the end of the day, we need to come to a consensus on the different world problems, which is in the format of your resolution, there's no point in doing MUN at large. So the idea is what? Have your heated discussions, have your heated debates, push your point across, make as much sense as you can on what you believe is true. But at the end of the day, look from a global perspective and come together and find this resolution in your committee inside the conference. I think it's going to be lovely because we have 23 diverse committees, 23 diverse agendas that we're going to be discussing. And I'm sure many of you all are very vocal, very innovative and very creative. And I can't wait to watch you all in your own discussions, debates, and see what kind of unique solutions and resolutions you all come up of at the conference. That being said, we shall now conclude today's session. I will get a copy of a resolution format and put it across on the different WhatsApp groups of the committees. Tomorrow's session will be an exclusive doubt solving session. So there are 25 points in the Hearts MUN rules of procedure. I want you to go through them between today and tomorrow evening. And whatever points you have questions or queries about, I want you to note them down and let me know in the chat box what your questions and queries are. And I will dedicate tomorrow's session to just answering all of your questions at large. That being said, really excited. We're just a few days away. Looking forward to meeting you all. And yes, Kavya, I will be sending the document in the group. Don't worry, but please don't spam the chat as well. That being said, thank you all for joining in for today's session. Hope it was fruitful for all of you. Best wishes and see you all tomorrow evening, same time, same channel. Have a lovely evening ahead. Bye bye.
Then try